When I was 12, sadly, a lot of people around me were dealing with thoughts of suicide. I didn't know many people that had actually done that, although every now and then, maybe like once every few years, someone in my school would actually follow through. And I think, I'm not 100%, but I think this might have started in the Catholic Church, that if you take your own life, then it's an automatic ticket to hell. And one day, Jesus decided to show me what really, really can happen. I'd been visiting heaven. God had been letting me visit heaven for just a few months. And Jesus took me one day and he wanted to show me something new. So in heaven, he takes my arm and our spirits are flying through the clouds above the city of New Jerusalem. New Jerusalem is heaven's biggest city. We were moving really fast, so I was trying to make out things, and then I saw a couple skyscrapers just like coming out of the clouds. And as we get closer, I start to realize it's almost like, imagine like God took a giant hand and scooped a chunk of New York City out of the ground and then lifted it like several hundred feet above the actual city and then just left it hanging there. It's about 1 or 2 square blocks and a few skyscrapers and some buildings. And so when Jesus and I settled down onto the pavement and gravity sort of took hold, I looked around and it was different than the rest of heaven, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why yet. Well, Jesus let me just orient myself for just a moment, and then he said, "Come with me again." So he lifted off and headed towards a skyscraper, and I, through the power of the Holy Spirit, just followed him. And as we go up to this skyscraper, I start to see through this one darkened window into what looked like a hospital room. And there was one bed in this very large hospital room. It looked like a very normal private hospital room you would see on Earth. And there was one person in the bed, and he was very skinny and sort of had like a greasy look to his hair, like really dark brown hair, was kind of gaunt in his face, had really, really drawn in, and he was just laying and resting. He wasn't exactly asleep, but you know when you can just close your eyes and rest? That's kind of what sleep looks like in heaven. Well, as I was watching, I saw a nurse come through the door. And at this point, I knew I was in heaven, but everything just looked like Earth, really looked like Earth. Over to him and said something pleasant to him, and I think tucked in his sheets or changed something out and then left again, and he was just in the room and everything was okay. And I was wondering, I was thinking, Jesus was next to me. He wanted me to see this. I didn't get what was going on. Angel nurse closed the door and left. Knowledge just suddenly flooded into me, and I understood what was going on. I was looking in at a young man, a teenager, probably about 17 years old, who had taken his own life, unalived himself. And yet he had faith, even though he had been in such a miserable place emotionally and spiritually that he had decided to end it. He still had enough faith in a God who was bigger than him, that is, he was brought to heaven. And no, not everybody who takes their own life goes to heaven, but it's not on punishment. It's on choice. It's on choice. So Jesus then explained why this place was different. It was different because it didn't have this city, this section of the city didn't have the normal glory glow that is everywhere else in heaven. Everything was just okay. The streets were not paved with gold. They were just paved. And it was just okay. It wasn't so full of glory. And what Jesus explained to me is that when someone is in that dark of a place and they then go to heaven, that glory of heaven can just overwhelm them and they cannot be ready. Like you've been living in a cave for so long, and if someone just rips open the door or shines a light in, it can hurt. It can hurt if that light comes in too soon. And so what happens is these people wake up in what looks like a normal Earth hospital room. Many of them believe, oh, I wasn't successful, but all the stressors are gone. Everything's just okay. The nurse is just nice. It's kind of what you would expect. Nothing is wrong anymore. And slowly their soul starts to heal. And why that young man had looked the way he had, first of all, he reflected the way he had looked on earth before he left earth. And second, it was the state of his soul. He wasn't done healing yet. And Jesus told me that at a certain point, when they are ready and their soul has healed, then the truth sort of just dawns on them, or someone comes to tell them that actually you're no longer alive and you're in heaven. And then after they process that knowledge, when they're ready and they've been healed, then they can leave this different city and enter the rest of heaven that is so full of glory. And there are many hospitals like this. There are many hospitals like this in heaven. Jesus, at the time I was 12, told me not to tell anybody. This is a big one not to tell, because I had so many people around me that probably could have used that knowledge. But he told me not to tell. I didn't even tell my parents. I wrote it in a journal and then stapled the pages shut because of how serious this secret was. And I hid the journal under my bed. And it was only well over 10 years later that Jesus told me it's time to start telling people. Even if your loved ones took their life this way, all is not lost. All hope is not lost. And God still cares for us even after we're gone.